Seiken Densetsu 3 was released in 1995 for the Super Famicom. It was instantly lavished with praise, with particular appreciation being directed towards the visuals and sound design. International fans eagerly awaited an official localization, one that would seemingly never come to pass. That was until 2019, when Collection of Mana was properly localized for the Nintendo Switch. Seiken Densetsu 3 had finally left Japanese shores, now rechristened as Trials of Mana. And hot off the heels of this long-awaited release, Square Enix has delivered a proper Trials of Mana remake for the PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and PC. A quarter century after the original first arrived on Japanese store shelves, how does the remade Trials of Mana hold up to modern standards? Let's find out. But first, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to get notified whenever I post new videos. You can also check out videos from my backlog, such as last month's review of Sakura Wars. Now let's get started. This review and the related footage is based on physical retail copies of the game for the PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch.
Trials of Mana.
Seiken Densetsu 3, and by extension Trials of Mana, follows a selection of 6 playable characters. During their journeys, they discover a fairy who forms a bond with the party leader. The fairy tasks you with retrieving the Mana Sword and banishing evil from the land before the Mana Tree dies. It's an undeniably retro plot, one befitting a mid-90s RPG. In a lot of ways, this classic design is great. The first half of Trials of Mana absolutely flies by. There are no side quests, and you don't have to talk to a dozen one-off NPCs every few minutes. In general, the pacing of the first half is brisk and pleasant. It's all the good bits with none of the fluff or filler, and I think the first half of the game is undeniably fun. However, that old school mentality means it comes with all the old school flaws as well. The latter half of the story slows down considerably, bogged down by outdated tropes and somewhat irritating design choices. These issues are further exacerbated by the narrative's pre-existing problems. As mentioned, Trials of Mana features 6 playable characters, each with their own primary motivations. However, unlike its RPG descendants such as Octopath Traveler, you cannot play as every character in one session. Rather, you select 3 characters to control, and the remaining 3 make cameos along your journey. This does add a layer of replayability to the story, which can be nice, but it also leaves an individual playthrough feeling somewhat disjointed. In practice, I found this structure made multiple completions more of a necessity than an option for players wishing to experience the full adventure. There's also a brand new post-game story arc. However, I personally thought the post-game content mirrored the weaker latter half of the narrative rather than the stronger former half. While its inclusion is nice and it's thematically very sound and consistent, I wish the new arc had more of the briskness that the introductory sections had in spades. How you feel about the new content will ultimately boil down to how you feel about the concluding half of the base story. It's inevitable that the game's narrative is showing its age. The strong moments are still resonant, but the sticking points are as problematic as ever. Overall, I would say the story is good, especially for being 25 years old and mostly unchanged, but its persistent flaws hold it back from achieving true greatness. When it comes to performance, unsurprisingly, the PC version will run the best, with the usual suite of resolution and frame rate options. The PS4 version runs at 60 frames per second, with the standard PS4 resolution at 1080p and PS4 Pros at 1440p. Finally, the Switch version runs at around 720p at 30 frames per second, with handheld versus docked performance being virtually identical. The image is definitely softer on Switch than on PS4 or PC, but it doesn't look too bad thanks to the art style, and the lower resolution is unnoticeable when playing in handheld mode. All versions have varying trouble maintaining a consistent frame rate, but the drops are most prevalent on Switch. This, along with a bevy of other performance issues like frequent texture pop-in, put the Switch version a step down from other platforms. No matter the platform, however, Trials of Mana's performance is all form and no substance. The art direction is certainly nice and makes up for some of the lesser issues, but the technical side definitely has flaws and is otherwise unremarkable. The music, on the other hand, is as timeless as ever. The original music was already amazing, and the remake follows suit. One of the best things about the remake score is the ability to choose either the original or the remade soundtrack, and both sound fantastic. On the subject of audio, the English voiceover is not very good. At its worst, it's nearly unbearable, and at its best, it's simply above average. I have no idea what happened during localization, nor will I pretend to know. It's not as if the English cast is without talent. The credits include actors like Alejandro Saab, Brittany Cox, and Stephanie Panicello, all of whom are very skilled. It's a shame then that the English VO pretty regularly misses the mark. I hesitate to call the Japanese voiceover plainly superior because even the Japanese dub is just fine. It too has problems, some of which are in common with the English dub, but it is generally speaking better. It's also probably the better option if you don't speak Japanese because you won't be able to pick up on the nuances, or in this case, the lack thereof. Here's a scene in both languages to demonstrate what I mean.
What senile old fool would entrust the security of the castle to a child? Oh, my apologies. You work for the king, do you not?
What? Don't you dare insult His Majesty!
まだまだ子供だな。こんな奴を雇っている英雄王は大した王じゃなさそうだ。
なんだと？国王陛下を悪く言うことは絶対に許さん！
Again, I have no idea what could have caused these issues during development and localization, but I think it's a shame that the spoken dialogue, regardless of your specified language, comes across as so lackluster. On the other hand, Trials of Mana's transformative approach to combat is perhaps its greatest accomplishment. The remake successfully preserves the core style of the original combat, while simultaneously making all the individual functions just a bit more cohesive and approachable. You have your basic and strong attacks, you can charge a strong attack to deliver a more crippling strike, the ring system returns with almost identical functionality to the original, pushing up on the D-pad brings up the item ring, which can be customized outside of combat. Pushing down on the D-pad brings up the skill ring, which contains all of your special techniques and spells, and each character has a few unique finishing blows. Enemies drop CP crystals which fill up the CP meter, and finishing blows require varying amounts of CP to perform. To unlock all these skills, you need to spend training points, which you earn each time you level up, and upon reaching certain level thresholds, you can change classes. Each class change has a light path and a dark path, and each path has its own unique perks. It's all very faithful to the original gameplay, though much more modern. This is, in my opinion, the most logical progression of the classic combat. Trials of Mana manages to retain that simple pick-up-and-play approachability that evolves over time. The customizability of the gameplay, from who you choose as your party, to the paths you choose for class changes, to the skills you choose to unlock, allows for a great amount of freedom, and if you intend to replay the game to complete each character's unique story, you'll have a lot of variance between each completion. And it's here, when the modernized gameplay is coupled with the remake's more contiguous overworld, that I think Trials of Mana is at its best. Smooth and well-paced with player-driven progression and customizable party AI, Trials of Mana's mechanical flexibility is fantastic. While it doesn't have the same degree of complexity as its later successors, it's still good enough to stand on its own 2 feet 25 years after the fact. Trials of Mana is a remake much in the same vein as Link's Awakening on Nintendo Switch. It doesn't reimagine the events and experiences of the original game. Rather, it takes the 1995 iteration as is and applies a new coat of paint. There are inherent issues, namely the voice acting and technical performance, especially on Nintendo Switch. And because this is an incredibly faithful adaptation, the game as a whole is very old school, for better or for worse. But that faithfulness to the source material is Trials of Mana's most powerful asset. This is a chance for players to experience this classic, whether that be in a whole new light or for the very first time. Completely unabridged, inherently flawed, and ultimately timeless, it's not for everyone, but it's definitely for me. Trials of Mana earns a 7.5 out of 10 for PlayStation 4 and PC, and a 7 out of 10 for Nintendo Switch. Now, would it be too much to ask for a modern port or remake of Sword of Mana? Oh, and can we get a mulligan on that Secret of Mana remake too? That'd be pretty sweet. Once again, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to get updates whenever I post new videos, and check out my other content on screen. Thanks.